Our next story is about the U.S. banking crisis. It seems to be spreading. Yesterday, regional banks in America suffered more losses. Their stocks were in the red. They plunged by more than 10%. Investors are pulling out their money. They fear that more banks are on the brink of collapse. Two of them are in the headlines. PacWest and Western Alliance. They're both mid-sized banks. Both are said to be in trouble, and both are exploring their options, including a potential sale. This week began with the sale of First Republic. The bank was in distress. It was sold to JP Morgan. Now it appears that PacWest and Western Alliance could be headed in the same direction. PacWest is in particularly bad shape. Yesterday, its shares dropped by more than 50%, and a 50% drop is a clear red flag. This year has been bad for the bank. In all, it has lost more than 85% of its stock value, which means losses for investors, millions of dollars in losses, and the bleeding is still on. So PacWest is being forced to consider radical moves. The bank issued a statement, I'm quoting from it. Recently, the company has been approached by several potential partners and investors. Discussions are ongoing. The company will continue to evaluate all options to maximize shareholder value. What does this mean? It means that all options are on the table. That's what the bank is saying. It could sell its assets, it could bring in an investor, it could even consider an all-out sale. And these are extreme measures, and they tell you how big the crisis is. In fact, all the banks that are in trouble face the same problem, the problem of liquidity. There's a cash crunch. They don't have money. Where did the money go? Ask the U.S. Central Bank. They call it the Federal Reserve. In recent months, the Fed has hiked interest rates. And that hike has punched a hole in the books of American banks. How did that happen? Well, these banks held many government bonds. With the rate hikes, the value of those bonds has declined. So now the banks are in trouble. And the Fed is still hiking interest rates. Yesterday, it announced another hike, the 10th one since March 2022. You know what this means for American banks? It means more pain. But the Fed chairman is not worried. He claims the U.S. banking system is resilient.
Let me comment briefly on recent developments in the banking sector. Conditions in that sector have broadly improved since early March, and the U.S. banking system is sound and resilient. We will continue to monitor conditions in the sector. We're committed to learning the right lessons from this episode, and will work to prevent events like these from happening again.
The banking system is sound and resilient, he says. If that's the case, then why are banks collapsing? PacWest is exploring options, and Western Alliance is braving a storm. Yesterday, its stock price plunged by 62%. This is after a report came out that said the bank is exploring a potential sale, and that Western Alliance has hired advisors to explore options. The report also said that these deliberations are at an early stage. The stocks began falling. Western Alliance rushed into damage control mode. It denied the report. It called it, quote-unquote, categorically false. The stock recovered, but only partially, a gain of 32%. The bank also released its deposit numbers. They're holding steady for now, but investors are increasingly wary. There are growing calls for regulatory intervention. Wall Street executives and bank analysts want the Federal Reserve to intervene. They want the central bank to take more steps to ensure more liquidity for the banks. But will that really help? And will that be enough, considering the fact that the Fed's own credibility is being questioned? The Fed chairman made an admission this week, and he said that the bank had made some mistakes.
I fully recognize that we made mistakes. I think we've learned some new things as well, and we need to do better. And as I mentioned, I thought the report was unflinching and appropriately so. I welcome it, and I agree with and will support those recommendations. And I do feel that I'm personally accountable to do what I can to foster measures that will address the problems.
So the Fed made mistakes, and American banks paid the price for it. In the last 2 months, 3 banks have failed: Silicon Valley, Signature Bank, and First Republic Bank. Their combined asset base was nearly $550 billion, which is not a small amount. Yet these banks could not survive. If this list grows, the U.S. Fed will face some tough questions. After a long week of toil and trouble, are you looking forward to some much-needed relaxation? Waking up late in the morning, catching up with friends, or binge watching that Netflix series you've been meaning to. What about exercising though? Are you looking forward to exercising as well? I know it's almost weekend and you must be swimming in Friday feels. So you'd rather not discuss exercise right now. The sweat and tears that come with it don't really scream happiness. But hear me out. Even small amounts of exercise can have an outsized effect on your happiness. And why is that? Because of a secret sauce, one that is made up of something called hope molecules. Here's a report. Exercising is different for different people, but for some, it is a haunting New Year resolution, the guilt behind every burger, and the broken promise we constantly try to keep. Our relationship with exercise is just not working out because that itself can be a daunting exercise. Poetics aside, we have some data for you. More than a quarter of the world does not exercise enough, and despite all the resolutions we keep, there's been no improvement in global levels of physical activity since 2001. That being said, remember different countries exercise differently. So some are doing relatively all right. Citizens in the Netherlands are the most active. They spend about 13 hours a week working out, followed by Germany, Romania, Russia, Hungary, and India. Yes, Indians aren't too far behind. They spend about 8 hours a week exercising. But then there are countries like Italy, Japan, and Brazil. And we don't mean to call anyone out, but they spend less than 4 hours a week on exercise. 1 in 3 people in Japan don't exercise at all. It won't be too surprising if a lot of us can relate to that statement. But here's the thing. As tough as the pre-exercise inertia is, beating it is totally worth it. And you don't have to be another Jane Fonda to do so, because exercise in whatever form and for however long makes our lives better. You probably already know that because the physical benefits of movement have been long documented. It lowers blood pressure, reduces the risk of cancer and diabetes. It helps us age in a healthy manner, and the list goes on and on. But the benefits are not just physical, they are emotional as well. As saddening as the thought of working out sounds, exercising makes us happier. It improves our mood and our ability to learn. It even makes us more hopeful. Yes, exercising gives us hope. And science has a clear answer why. We can't see the magic because it happens at a cellular level. When we exercise, our muscles contract. They secrete chemicals into our bloodstream. At the risk of giving you a terrible analogy, think of a wet sponge. When scrunched, it releases water. Now these released chemicals enter our bloodstream and make a nice little journey to our brains. These chemicals are often called hope molecules because they literally act as antidepressants. They make us feel good. But here's the thing. We can preach about the perks of exercising all we want. In reality, when we're feeling low, all we want to do is marinate on our couch and zone out in front of Netflix. But that's exactly what's hurting us. Teenagers who use screens throughout the day are twice as likely to get depressed. People with lower physical activity have lower self-esteem. Moral of the story? Get moving to get happy. And it need not be a high-intensity workout. Even a simple 10-minute walk will help. Exercise, even in small doses, is waiting to be your happy pill. Just hours to go for the coronation of King Charles. He waited 70 years for the throne. I'm sure he can wait another 24 hours. Can't say the same about his realm, though. Charles is not just King of the United Kingdom. He's the head of state in 14 other countries. Let me pull up that map for you. Charles is king in Canada and Australia, in New Zealand and the Bahamas, also in Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea. These people did not pick the monarchy. It was forced upon them by British colonialism. We're talking about a different time here. Many young countries were confused about their future after independence, so sticking with the Queen may have seemed logical then. But now things have changed. The so-called realms are not young countries anymore. They are mature democracies. Some of them are rethinking their ties with the crown. They're wondering why they're getting a new king. Indigenous leaders from 12 Commonwealth countries have written to King Charles. They want him to do three things: apologize for colonialism, pay reparations using crown wealth, and return looted artifacts. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can say this for sure: Charles will do none of it. He has talked about acknowledging the mistakes of colonialism, but acknowledgement is one thing, apology is quite another. I know a sorry sounds like too little too late, but sometimes it can go a long way. Just ask UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Last week, he was asked to apologize for British colonialism and the slave trade. He refused. Sunak says focus on the present, not the past. And that comment has been slammed by the Prime Minister of Belize. It's one of the 15 countries where Charles is king. The Prime Minister of Belize says Sunak should have apologized. He also says Belize will, quote-unquote, quite likely remove the monarchy. So 14 realms could soon become 13, 14 apart from the UK. Perhaps even less. Another country, Jamaica, is thinking along the same lines. There are reports of a referendum next year. If the public agrees, Charles will lose Jamaica as well. So it's a gradual process. Queen Elizabeth II lost 17 countries in her reign, like Sri Lanka, Barbados, Kenya, and Pakistan. Her son is on course to losing at least 2. Where does that leave the monarchy? In a precarious situation. But do you know what the irony is? It's the small developing countries that are ditching the crown. The so-called progressive Western countries are not. One reason for that is the process. It's extremely hard to abolish the monarchy. There are a lot of proposals, a lot of votes, a lot of campaigning. Take Canada, for example. If they want to abolish the monarchy, they need unanimous support from the House of Commons, from the Senate, and from all 10 provinces, which is why many experts feel nobody's interested. Same thing with Australia. They have a Republican Prime Minister in Anthony Albanese, but he too will swear loyalty to the king.
I haven't changed my position on that, and I've made that very clear. I want to see an Australian as Australia's head of state. That doesn't mean that you can not have respect for the institution, which is the system of government that we have.
You cannot respect and abolish something. The fact is, not every former colony has the same relationship with the crown. The likes of Australia and Canada may not mind the king, but the likes of Jamaica, Barbados, and Belize do. These are countries that really paid the price for colonialism, with slavery, with engineered famines, and with constant looting. For them, the crown is a painful symbol. So why not dash for the door? If they're scared of risking ties with the UK, just look at India. India is a former colony, but also a republic. Saying no to the crown did not hurt India's ties with the UK. Having said that, some residual doubts remain, like the Commonwealth of Nations, a group of 56 countries, including India. All of them are former colonies of Britain. By default, it is headed by the king or queen. And reports say the new king has a keen interest in India. He's visited 10 times already. His friends say he wants to visit again at the earliest opportunity. To do what exactly? Apparently, Charles loves Indian culture and practices like yoga. We say his interest is certainly welcome, but his royal legacy, not so much. India has long debated the relevance of the Commonwealth. It is not strategic, it is not economically helpful, and it has a burden, the burden of a traumatic past. So why bother holding on to it? Leaving the Commonwealth may not have material gains, but it will bring closure. As for the political fallout, New Delhi should not be worried. The Commonwealth is a relic of the empire, not the UK, the same UK that did not think twice before storming out of the European Union. If that was nationalism, then so is this. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Taiwan is conducting civilian drills to prepare for a Chinese attack. This is amid rising tensions between the neighbors. In Denmark, slackliners drew in crowds in the capital city of Copenhagen. They walked a 160-meter-long high line strung 15 meters above the ground. In Italy, Naples is exploding with joy. The city has finally won its first Serie A soccer title in over 3 decades. And now, taking you back in history, why is the 5th of May significant? Let's go back to the year 1961. Today, America sent its first astronaut in space, Alan B. Shepard Jr., who was launched 185 kilometers into space. He made a 15-minute suborbital flight. That'll be all for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday.
Some applause from the 120 or so people. He's going up with, I believe, Dr. Douglas and another technician, the spacesuit technician. Liftoff. Liftoff at 34 minutes after the hour.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.